Hello, everybody. Good evening. And if you're from somewhere else in the universe, world, hello from insert your time zone and applicable thing here. And oh god, I keep forgetting I must mute the YouTube channel when I'm checking if it's going live, because otherwise I hear myself and then I want to just throw up because I have a really annoying voice. So this is Virtual Fusion. This is our second time round. So hello, everybody. I'm now going to go through the obligatory introduction to Fusion and all the things that we do and what we are. So this is Fusion with lovely brand. Those three colors represent three different things that Fusion does. So there's the Fusion event, of which you are one of participating in one right now. There are the workshops, at which point this week, I believe Dylan Beatty was running a bunch on building good teams, and communicating, I believe. So workshops, and then there is the normal day-to-day of Fusion talent. So all that stuff, go talk to Hannah. She's around at the moment. So, and I need to make sure I'm clicking next slide. There we go. And our sponsors for this evening to make everything run smoothly and make it actually just go off without a pop. We have Majestic, one of the beautiful companies in the Birmingham tech scene, and they've been around with us for a while. There's Vonage. I'm hoping that one of the dev advocates from Vonage are in the crowd so they can answer any questions you may have. I'm not sure if they will be. And then there's Logs.io, and that is me. Oh, wrong side. Logs.io. So that's a logging platform. We're also a sponsor. If you want to ask questions, I will be in the chat. And there is also, we're a huge supporter of different parts of the Birmingham tech scene. And from mine to Hack the Midlands, which I think was already taken place this year, Cryogenics, which happens to be Stuart Language's personal thing, School of Code, who I believe the cohort on the 11th or 12th week. Somebody from School of Code, please feel free to tell me which week it is, because I feel bad that I've forgotten. Sorry, everybody. And yeah, so we love the community around us and we want to support them and them support us. So there we go. Those are the people. Week 10. There we go. It's week 10 for them. And as with anything, there is a code of conduct. So please be nice. In the words of Will Wheaton, don't be a jerk. If you want to actually double check what happens, etc., please read the code of conduct. It is an important thing. So next up, we're going to start with the talks. I'm going to let Hannah do the initial introduction. I hope she's ready for this. And then we are going to get on with the show. We have four brilliant speakers in the form, well, three speakers and one robot that is a video technically, which is Stuart Baker. We have Gerard Sands, Chris Norring, and Zoe Rose. They're going to be talking on everything from mental health through to security, offline applications, personal favorite of mine, not gonna lie, and Blazor, which if not gonna lie, I'm gonna look in, I'm going to enjoy watching the talk because I have an inkling of what it is. It feels like Xamarin, but not. So yeah, that's going to be interesting. So yeah, first up is a Hannah. Hello, Hannah. You ready to do this?
Hi. Yeah. How are we all? Second virtual fusion. I hate calling it virtual fusion. I'm still not okay with the whole fact that we're doing it like this. But
I have a beer to make it feel more real.
Yay, me too. Woo! That's good. That's good. Okay, well, I'm one of those people, by the way. I've got this is my little Christmas tree. I've jumped straight into it in November. Anyone else got their Christmas tree up in November? I'm not usually one of those people, by the way. Okay, so have you got your Christmas tree up, Mike? Oh, have you really? Will you share a photo?
When it's finished, yes.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, like, not now, but I'd love to see a photo of your Christmas tree. Share photos of your Christmas trees, yay, if you want to. Okay, I'm going to get on to introducing the first speaker. Just to kind of talk a little bit about, obviously, people who have been to Fusion before, or even just watched the last one in September, will know that we keep the conversation about mental health going. It's really important to us. We we started Mind Mondays, actually, which you may or may not see. We've been dropping a blog every Monday. I haven't done it this week. I've had a bit of a busy week, sorry. But there's some great content on our website. So for the last 4 or 5 Mondays, on Mind Mondays, you'll find tips on what we've been listening to, what we've been reading. And this is not necessarily focused around mental health specific topics. It can just be things that just make us feel good, things that we've enjoyed doing. So have a look. For those who read last week's, we mentioned the mindset triangle, and we actually have one of the co-authors, Stuart Baker, who's doing the first talk this evening. So he is co-founder and coach at the Mindset Triangle, and his talk is the birth of the Mindset Triangle and how to implement it into your life. If there's any questions for Stuart, we'll drop a link to Facebook, Instagram, and also Twitter as well. So if you've got any questions and you want to direct them straight to him, we'll pop his information in the chat.
How are we doing? Thank you very much, Hannah. Sorry, go on. Are we there? We're there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how you doing? Thank you very much, Hannah. For one, I haven't got my Christmas tree up. These fairy lights are in my stepdaughter's room all the time. There's no Christmas tree at the minute. I refuse to until December. So yeah, my name's Stu. So tonight I'll be talking about my experience with mental illness and where it led me, where the mindset triangle come from, and then, like Hannah said, how to implement it, how easy it is to implement it into your life. So we'll go straight in. We've only got 20 minutes, so we've got to be really quick. Okay. So yeah, I'm Stu. I'm 40. I've got 3 kids, 3 stepkids, 2 cats and a dog. I think that's about it. And I live in North Worcestershire now, in Alvechurch, and I'm a gym manager. So I've gone through. I was a PT, and I've been in a PT for about 12 years. But now I got to the age of 40, realised I need a pension, so I've gone into the full-time employment and become a gym manager. So at the age of 17, I joined the Navy, and I was in the Navy for about 8 years. And it wasn't really. I've lived with depression for probably about 20 years, and I don't really know where it came from. Don't really know why. I spent a lot of my years trying to blame something, but then after therapy and stuff like that, I sort of realised, well, if something was to blame, would it make any difference? Probably not. I'll still be exactly the same. So yeah, I joined the Navy as a lad. Sailor of the world. I was an aircraft engineer. So if all of you seen Top Gun, please tell me you've all watched Top Gun. It was a bit like that, but without the half-naked volleyball. So I was in the Navy, and I played rugby to quite a high standard within the Navy. So I played for the Navy and played for local teams and stuff. And it's only now that I reflect back on it that that was my self-harm. Because when I wasn't playing rugby, I would self-harm. But playing rugby, it was fine because I'd have that release on a Saturday to completely go 100% into a game of rugby and either not hit someone, but tackle someone hard, get tackled hard. And I used to love it. And I used to be absolutely fine. So that was that. And then alcohol, really, because I played rugby and then I was in the Navy. So alcohol was a massive part of my life, or socialising as such. And it wasn't until I got older that I realised how detrimental that was to my mental health. So it wasn't until I left the Navy, did loads of jobs, and then I got into the fitness world, and then I snapped my knee playing rugby. When I come back home to Coventry, I snapped my knee, and then the rugby was taken away from my life. I was a personal trainer, trying to teach people to squat with only one leg, self-employed. So I thought, you know what, it's not worth it now. So I'm only playing social rugby. It's all about the beers afterwards, really. So then I went downhill pretty quickly. And that's like, I always call it a 10-stone duvet. So I'd be lying in bed and the duvet just weighs 10 stone and you cannot get out of bed in the morning. I went from job to job. I was drinking a lot. Just no self-worth. Thought it was pointless. Didn't see the point in life. So at the time I got dragged by from my wife at the time to the doctors, reluctantly, obviously, because I'm a man and I don't need to see a doctor if I'm feeling a little bit sad. But I went there and they asked the problem and I just let it out. about suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation, self-harming, how I was feeling, and had been for sort of like months. And he, bless him, the doctor turned around and said, "To be honest, Mr. Baker, I just think you need to cheer up." Cheers, pal. Thanks. Never really thought of that. So I stormed out the doctors, and then 2 weeks later I went again, and I went to a doctor that was brilliant. She was awesome, and she put me on a course of medication, which obviously I didn't want to take, but reluctantly went onto it, and I started to feel a little bit better. Now, I never spoke to anybody about it. The rugby lads, I was in a male environment, so I played rugby and I was in the Navy, even when I was self-harming back in my 20s and stuff. Male dominated, and rugby environment, Navy environment, you're meant to be tough, in the forces. So I never spoke to anybody. So even when I was on the tablets and I started to feel a little bit better, I still never spoke about it, but I started a blog. And it wasn't a case of I wanted this blog to become famous. It was all to do with just venting. Now, I would write something and it wouldn't go through grammar police, wouldn't go through spell check. I'd just press enter and it would go. There'd be loads of F-bombs dropped, loads of C-bombs dropped, all about like the way I was feeling and stuff. And it started to evolve and snowball, and I wonder where it's going. But again, I didn't really care. But then while I was doing it, and while I was going through my own demons, a friend of mine took his own life, and nobody knew. He just went missing, and nobody knew. To the point, it went to an inquest, and they've put it down as an accident, even though he jumped in front of a train. They put it down as an accident because there was no evidence on his iPad. His missus didn't know. He just signed a 6-figure salary contract, massive car, massive house. Talking about babies the night before with his wife. And it really sort of not cut me up, but made me think. So, cut a long story short, the whole family and everyone was going to London to do a walk called Walking Out of Darkness, and it's a great walk. If we were ever allowed to go and do stuff again like this, then get involved. It's London, and we walk around London for 10 miles with everyone was in the same t-shirt, all about suicide awareness, all talking about mental health. So I contact the organizer and said, I'm a PT. I do all the Birmingham half marathon warm-ups. Would you like me to come down and warm you guys up? Because I'm coming down anyway. And he said, I've got someone anyway. Don't worry about it. But I've just read your blog and I'm quite inspired. Would you like to do a talk beforehand? I was like, yeah, as Stu would. Yeah. Put the phone down. I thought, what the am I going to talk about? Don't know. But within my blog, I came up with a concept called the mindset triangle, right? And this was the birth of it, really, from that one talk. So imagine a fire triangle. Everyone remembers the fire triangle at school. For the fire to burn, you need 3 elements. So you need oxygen, heat, and fuel. Yeah. Now, for me to have a healthy mindset, and don't get me wrong, this is never going to cure depression, schizophrenia, OCD, or any mental illness. It doesn't cure it, but it puts you in the best possible mental state or mental health for you to be able to fight whatever you're fighting. Okay, so within my mindset triangle, I've got healthy eating, exercise, and sleep. Now, you keep a good balance of that, and it's always good to reflect on it. So I've always reflected on it, live my life by the triangle now, and I'll say things to my girlfriend and the kids. My triangle's feeling about rounded. I need a pointier triangle because I might wake up on a Monday morning and feel shit, and the duvet's weighing, getting heavy, and it could be 10 stone. But I reflect back and think, well, hang on a minute, mate. You got to bed at 2 o'clock on Saturday night after watching the boxing. You had 3 glasses of red wine, and you had a pizza. No wonder you're feeling shit. Now get out of bed and crack on, and make sure you hydrate, make sure you eat, make sure you walk a little bit further to feel a little bit better. And then it sort of just snowballed. So this is what I do now. My business, my PT business, went from Urban Fitness, as it was called, and now it's called Mindset Triangle. And it wasn't until where me and my girlfriend met, we did networking, and I was a PT. Henriette was a photographer, and one night we went for a glass of wine, after an event that we went to. And at the time, I was doing loads of cooking videos. I love my cooking. I did a load of cooking videos on YouTube for my clients. And I just said over a glass of wine, I'd love to write a book one day. And she went, well, let's do it. So then 14 months later, we had the Mindset Triangle book land at the door, stock 500 copies, land at the door. And yeah, it was great. And that's what it is. That book is just full of got about 50 recipes, loads of exercises, workouts in there, loads of tips on sleep. And then what was really the best part of the book for me is we went around and we interviewed loads of people, and we only asked them 3 questions: what mental illness do you live with? How do you cope with it? And what's your favourite food? Okay, and it was just a very honest account. And we wanted that because I think that it's very flippant. People use the terms very flippantly. Like, I hear it all the time, like, oh, I'm depressed today. No, you're not, mate. Man United lost on Sunday. You're a bit pissed off. You're not depressed. And like people say, oh, that must be the OCD in me. No, it's not, mate. You're just like a clean kitchen. If you had OCD, you'd know about it. And we wanted to make it really real. And that's what, and hopefully I'll come across now. I do apologise if I do drop in the odd swear word, but it's a passion of mine, because mental health and physical health are exactly the same. Okay, if one drops down, then the other one will drop down. If one gets better, then the other one will get better. Okay, and it should be like that. We should be looking after our mental health as we look after our physical health. We all know as a kid we have 5 fruit and veg a day. Okay, but if you ask a kid how to help their mental health, they haven't got a clue because it's not taught that. And a good analogy that I've always used is if, well, there's a couple actually. If you break every bone in your body, you wouldn't wait to break every bone in your body to go to A&E. So why do we have to wait to get to crisis point before we sort out our mental health? If I would have known, yeah. So go back to me. If I would have known, then I wouldn't have waited as far as I got because it was scary. Yeah. While I was writing the book, I was going through loads of stuff. My business was crap. I was drinking far too much. And I was going through a divorce. Loads of things were going on. I tried to take my own life. I walked through a bridge one night and got taken off by police at 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's how real it got. And I was a mental health advocate. I was writing the bloody book, for God's sake. Do you know what I mean? I was doing these public speaking talks. The couple of days before I went to a public speak, I wasn't looking after myself. And I want to get across that if you wake up, a lot of people wake up with a cold in the morning. Yeah. It's absolutely fine to say, yeah, I've got a cold, isn't it? But if you wake up a bit shit, then why can't we talk about being shit? Now, it's really easy to implement all of this into your life. Okay, I'll just give a couple of examples with exercise. I'm not asking you to join a gym or sign up for the next half marathon or the marathon or whatever. Here's a test for you. All of us go shopping, pull into Sainsbury's car park or Tesco's. Everyone fights for that bloody door, that parking space next to the door. Go and park in the corner and get that extra 100 steps. And then if you get a trolley with a dodgy wheel, as all of us do, then he gives you a good call, workout at the same time. But he's putting the extra steps in. Yeah, using the stairs instead of the escalator and the lift when you go shopping at the Bullring. Healthy eating, everything in moderation. As soon as you take something out of your diet, you'll crave for it. As soon as you have it, you feel guilty. And then you think it's pointless. So you just get into a vicious circle. Everything's in moderation. Okay. If a diet has got a name like Slimming World, Weight Watchers, Atkins, go in lick a spinach leaf of a lunchtime diet, it's bad for you. Okay. They call food sins. Yeah. So everything's in moderation. If you like a cookie, have a cookie. All right. And then sleep. It's quite the hardest one to keep control of. Hardest one. We're in the world of technology nowadays, so it's hard to keep off the phones and stuff. But it's got a blue screen. I don't know how well the blue screen filters. Probably you guys know more than me. But it's getting into a routine before you go to bed. So now you're going to turn the TV off. Now you're going to, like, I don't know, clean the kitchen or pop in the kitchen, go upstairs, get changed, brush your teeth, get into bed. Don't watch TV in bed because your body can't work out if you're there to sleep or you're there to be entertained. Yeah. So just have your bed for sleeping. Go old fashioned to read a book. Hey, sleepless plug, buy one. But yeah, that's what it is in a nutshell. Okay, and there's lots of other things to improve your mental health that you can really do on a day-to-day basis. By all means, get in contact with me. I'm kicking off a program in January. It's called the TMT 28, and it's all based around goal setting, but really easy things. It's not like you have 3 priorities a day, and to-do list. I know it makes every bloke shudder because I think it's a DIY list, but it's a priority. You've got 3 priorities a day. And when I was in my shittest time, I would write the night before: shower, coffee, and brush teeth. Okay, so hopefully within the first hour of me waking up, I've ticked off 3 things. Naturally, that makes me feel better. Okay, 2 rules of that: try and do all 3. Don't go over egg. Don't say, "Well, tomorrow I'm feeling shit today. Tomorrow I'm going to run a marathon." No point, because you're setting yourself up to fail. Make sure they're really easy tasks, and then you can get better and better and better. And the second rule is don't feel guilty. There's nothing you can do about it. Unless your name's Martin McFly, you got a mate called Doc, and you got a car DeLorean to go back to yesterday to go and brush your teeth. It's pointless. So it's a pointless emotion to feel if you're going to miss something, and you'll get into that psychology of beating yourself up. So that's what it's all about the importance of setting tasks and not getting into the negative mindset. It's I'm conscious now. I think I'm running out of time. It's all about the perception. Okay, so there's no negative people in the world. You hear posts saying pull yourself away from negative people. It's your perception on taking that negative advice. Okay, so they might say something, you've made it negative or positive in your brain. Yeah, so perceive it and then put an action to it, and then put it the way that you want to do it. Yeah, if someone says to you, "Cool, you put on better weight," your perception could be, "Shit, I look bad, I'm fat," or you could turn that and think, "I've had a cracking week eating them." Do you know what I mean? It's different ways that you could do that. I could talk for absolute hours about this and how passionate I am about changing the stigma and stopping men killing themselves. 12 a day take their own life every day in the UK. 84 a week, and for one man that takes his own life, 20 attempts. That is ridiculous numbers. 75% of all suicide is men. Yeah, and we need to stop this. We need to stop this, and we need to get rid of the stigmas and talk about it. Yeah, I never spoke about it for 20 years, 25 years, 15 years, 20 years, and it got me to on a bridge. And now look back at it, and it was the scariest moment of my life. Okay, and I never want any bloke to think of the thought process that I was in still on that bridge, or the hour before that. Okay, so please talk, and it doesn't have to be chatting. It can be anything. In this day and age, text message, write yourself a letter, screw it up, burn it. Yeah, but you're venting. That blogging was the first thing that I ever did communicating that really, really helped. Write it down, screw it up, throw it away. No one needs to see it. It's just your way of venting. Don't keep it up there. Okay, now I think I've waffled on a little bit too much. Like Hannah said, if you do need to speak and you don't want to leave a chat now or whatever like that, find me on Instagram or Facebook. I don't do Twitter. I'm sorry. I've got an account, but I don't know where it is. So it's the Mindset Triangle. You'll find me on both. All right, or just drop Hannah questions, and then she can email me. All right. So thank you very much. And yeah, follow. So over to you, Mike.
Oh no, you're still under the firing line here. Sorry.
All right, okay, here we go.
You've got a grand total of like 7 minutes left of your 20 minutes.
What? Oh,
Yep. So feel free to add more.
Oh no, I think I waffled enough. Let's answer some questions.
Okay, everybody, if you have questions, please feel free to ask them. This is a subject that, especially all of us in isolation right now, I live on my own. Enjoying tier 3, which as far as I can tell is lockdown 2.1. I'm not going to see another blooming ghost, and I'm an extrovert, so I find it really hard to deal with the lack of external energy and input into my life. So if you have a question, now is a good time to ask. And on that topic, I'm going to start asking questions because I'm the host. I can get away with doing that.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so you were talking about the fact that just being able to get up and actually talk, even if it's into the universe, not to a specific person. What about in this dark time? What would be your guidance to say, me, somebody who's living alone. They don't have somebody else to communicate with, and they don't want to leave the paper trail. What would be your best suggestion on like just actually getting the conversation started, even if it's just with yourself? What mindset should you have?
Go back to the old cliche. It only takes one word that comes out your mouth and it just flows. Do you know what I mean? And I stayed quiet for years. Now you need to be in a strong mindset, and you need to accept the biggest thing of mental illness, or that you're struggling in your mental health, is acceptance. As soon as you can accept that you're feeling shit and you're in a bad place, then you can do something about it. Otherwise, you're just going to be in denial all the way until you accept it. Talking about the paper trail, write a journal if you want to keep it hidden somewhere, just from your thoughts. Or like I've known people before that have just written everything down on a piece of paper and burnt it, so there's no paper trail if they don't want to get rid of everything. But yeah, and in this time at the moment, lockdown is pretty hard. Don't get me wrong, the lockdown one, I had a couple of wobbles that I really struggled with. But it's getting outside, vitamin D, the old cliche of getting in the sun, getting wind in the face, going for a walk, sticking on a podcast, sticking on your best music. I'm a firm believer, and every day you should take a selfish hour, because everyone's got time. It's just a matter of priority. That selfish hour is anything that puts a smile on your face. And that can be watching reruns of Coronation Street. That can be going out for a walk, or like for me, I love cycling, so going out for a cycle, or cooking, which I love. But anything, once a day, make sure you take an hour just for yourself. And it makes a massive difference, because we're born and we're brought up to make everybody else happy, and you never make yourself happy.
Trying to work out what the blooming heck I can do during daylight hours that is actually happy for. It's like, playing video games, that doesn't give me sunshine. I actually need to get out in the sun.
No, but the selfish hour, if the selfish hour can be playing video games, but make sure you go and get some vitamin D and some air anyway. But like I said before, it's all about that perception. Like, for instance, the first lockdown, I got into a state of like, this is shit. I can only go out for 1 hour a day. I can only do this. I can only do that. But if you flip that and your perception of it is like, well, do you know what? In my working life, I am never going to get 10 weeks with my family, with my kids, spending time cooking, playing and stuff like that. I'm never going to get that again, to make the most of it. There's always a positive to a negative. You still thinking, Mike?
Yeah, I'm still thinking. I'm digesting before I ask something else.
Okay.
As a bigger bloke, I'm used to digesting. Okay. If people are after like formal guidelines and stuff, because I just to put a bit of a cliche on it, as a dev, I like clear facts and bits of information. Where would you suggest people go and have a look for guidance, for if they need some, essentially the not so crazy version of what's it called? Essentially Dr. Google. Where can you suggest people go look for guidance and a bit of help? Essentially not be BS.
All the charities are really good. So mine's got a really good website. What I find is really good at Calm. It's a brilliant website. And then if you've got kids, that you need to look up advice, because it's hard to speak to your kids as well. It's called Young Minds, and it's a fantastic website. It's all about what kids are going through, obviously with the pressures of the hormones, puberty, going through their exams and stuff like that. Yeah, Young Minds is good. But if you take anything away from today, if you get your phone and download an app called Hub of Hope, okay? And in a nutshell, it's like a Just Eat for mental health. So you can type in the search bar something, and every service, whether it's private or NHS, will pop up in your area with phone calls, websites, and everything that you can do. It's brilliant.
I'm just going to make a note of that, Hub of Hope, so I can deal with that when I can get my phone out.
Yeah, it's really good.
There we go. Brilliant. If is there any questions from the crowd? Otherwise, I'm going to ask. Well, I'm just going to ask if Stuart has anything else he'd like to share with us, or anything before he goes finishing cooking.
Yeah. Finish cooking. But yeah, like I say, they can ask me a question on Instagram. I'm trying to look at the YouTube now to see if anything's coming through. But there is no.
It's a scary subject to ask the wild for help, so I can understand.
Mate, I stayed quiet for 15 years, 20 years. Didn't speak to anybody about it. Self-harmed in like a toilet or whatever, so no one could see it. Do you know what I mean? And it's a tough, but you got to remember that no story is exactly the same. Everybody's got their own experience. I've lived with depression for X amount of years, but my depression is completely different to somebody else's. Everyone's mind is completely different, so don't beat yourself up about it, and just talk and get help. And if anyone wants to, like I say, chat or ask questions or whatever, or if you need a kickstart in January, jump on the Mindset Triangle and that TMT 28-day program to flip your mindset to more positive might be one for you. It's not a weight loss program. I'm a PT, and it's not a personal training program. The only exercise you have to do a day is sweat, and that's 1 bead of sweat on your forehead or anywhere, whether that's walk up the stairs 5 times or walk around the block or whatever. That's all you have to do. Yeah, just get it out there for January. It's not a weight loss program.
The timing's bad with that one, but brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Stuart. If that's the case, we're going to move on with the show, if that's okay.
Yeah, not a problem. Have a great night, and thanks for having us, Mike and Hannah.
Thanks very much, Stuart. Speak to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was ridiculously informative, and I say that in the best way possible. I think that's the second talk in the last 3 years about mental health and actually talking about stuff that's actually been a big deal to me. Last one was Jess Rose, and that was just about burnout, and that was a huge one because at the time she was burning out, surprisingly. So yeah. Okay, so time to move on. Next up, we are going to have Zoe Rose. She is a security specialist, cybersecurity specialist, with 10 years plus of experience. I'm going to drag her into the room so she can say hello. Hello, Zoe. You're muted. You've got the Zoom problem. You're on mute.
Sorry, I just wanted to make my camera actually make sense. Okay, I have slides, so I actually have to show my screen.
You actually have to share your screen.
No.
You're looking forward to this. How did you feel about the last talk?
No, it was a really good talk actually. I mean, I've unfortunately had to deal with maybe not the same situation, but also mental health issues, and I think it's really important to highlight those right away because, as Stu said, suffering in silence is not solving anything. It's just making you more miserable. So actually being very communicative about it, even recognizing it in your own personal, like to yourself, is really effective, that I've seen anyway. So I thought that was really cool. I was really happy. Yeah.
Cool. Right, I'm going to drag in your screen with the they don't get to see the amazing background. Right, I'm going to.
They can see it if they want. There's my amazing background. Brilliant webcomic. So I would check it out if I were you. It's hilarious.
Well, I will see you in 20 odd minutes.
All right, I'll start my timer. All right, so again, hello, my name is Zoe, and today I'm going to have a talk called Hear No Evil, See No Evil, Code No Evil. This is an adapted talk from a much longer one, so unfortunately I'm not going to go massively in depth, but I would love for any questions along the way about security, related things, or, well, anything really. The too long didn't read essentially of this talk is security is quite critical. Each and every one of you are part of the cyber defense team, and it's really, really critical that you don't wait until the end to implement security, because functionally that's just not reasonable, and also cost-wise that's probably going to be above and beyond what you can even budget. So the best approach is actually from the conception of the idea to start implementing controls, and throughout the life cycle actually do some testing. So a very short who am I? Again, my name is Rose. You can reach me on Twitter at RoseSecOps. I've been in security and technology for over 10 years. I kind of lost count. My main focus in security is, whilst I have that hands-on technical and I love technology, the reality is, if I want to actually make a change, I need to focus on the people using the solutions. And that's why I want to focus on human behavior. I want to make the difference in the culture around security, remove the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and implement solutions that actually are usable. A huge privilege that I've had is being able to do a lot of mentoring of people from across different industries, different levels of seniority, and I just think it's really great opportunity, because my goal is to allow people to be more prepared than I was when I started, to find an easier way in than to have to struggle through. I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu training, not at the moment, obviously, but that's what I do in my spare time, which is a part of my mental health program, actually. And I have 2 really adorable ferrets. So that's everything about me. So I think this is the belief that I've heard many times. I'm not a developer, mind you, and so I'm not going to try and pretend I know all of the things that you struggle with or have to deal with. But I am going to try and say, from my point of view as a security person, what I've seen in my career. So going back to this, I handle only a small piece of a much larger picture. It's almost like people tell me, my role is insignificant. My only job is ensuring that it runs. Others are employed to ensure that it runs safely afterwards. And that goes back to that issue of waiting for somebody else to do it, pushing it off, waiting for it to be done at the end. The reality is, you are given temporary access to somebody's intimate life details, and it's your job to protect it. Even if you're just a small person or a small piece of a much bigger picture, you're building that function, you're building that integration, and you need to ensure the way you're doing it is done right from the start. This also means, mind you, that the organization needs to support you in having the right training. I've interviewed many developers along writing articles or doing mentoring, and the one consistent that I've seen along the way is, I was taught how to build. I wasn't taught how to do it safely or securely. I wasn't taught these security principles, and that's valid. That's 100% valid. But the organization needs to do that training. They need to provide you with the technical training, but also security training. You need to have that awareness and understanding of threats. They need to have legitimate threat modeling done. Threat modeling is often misunderstood, and it's like, oh, it's easy, we'll just do it later. But if you understand it, yes, it can be easy. But you have to take the time to understand the consumers and understand that attack surface and the likely threat actors against you, essentially. Know their motivation, know their capability. Risk management doesn't sound super sexy, but actually understanding that in the whole picture is quite a critical part. And my favorite topic to discuss on is diversity. So you're part of a much bigger team. That's true. I agree with that. But when you look at the world, you look at it through your experiences, you look at it through your lenses, your skills, your culture, your points of view, that's how you view it. You might miss things. There might be gaps that you don't see along the way. If you've seen any of my other talks, I do a lot of discussion on domestic abuse and violence. When I joined the industry over a decade ago, I was in a not very safe environment. I was in a domestic abuse relationship, and I found security that that helped me get out of it. That helped me take back control and move forward with my life. And so my focus again has always been supporting people that, that are vulnerable, people that can't protect themselves. And so my point of view always is around, well, how can that be abused? Because unfortunately, for some threat actors, you've got them outside of the house. They're almost, opportunistic. They're not the people you're going to see every day. But for some people, for some consumers, they are in the house. They're next door. Maybe they're in the same bedroom. So you've got to design it in a way that's protecting those people too. And so to be able to see that, to be able to take that approach and understand that, you need that diversity of points of view and experiences and skills, of course. And the last piece I always like to talk about is know your consumers. If you know who you're building for, you're going to understand that threat map a little bit better. So the traditional view that I like to call my waterfall-like approach, because I know a tiny bit of development, and you have got the waterfall effect, you've got the agile. Sorry if I'm butchering these things, but essentially, I've been told that, well, at the conception, at the development, we just need it to work. We need to have the logic right. We need the workflows right. It needs to be functional. Testing in QA, that's when we look at, unit testing. That's when we look at, is it the right, versioning and that sort of thing. And then once that's done, once we've validated it all works, then we deploy it. And then later on comes a major update, and maybe we do a bit of more functional testing, making sure our changes aren't breaking something, existing. The challenge we have here is we get into a point where it's almost too expensive to go back. It's almost too expensive to make those solutions, to make those fixes. And maybe we do get a pen test done before deployment, but there's no value for money, because the pen test comes back and it's picked up really simple, lowest hanging fruit things, and you're like, well, yeah, okay, I could have found that myself. And the pen tester is spending all their time, validating the documentation. Okay, so I can build this API call. Okay, now it works. Now I can test it. And they're wasting time on things that could have been approached previously. The approach I like to take, and this is not scientific, those values, you can tell I doodled, it's not even in line. So don't take that as this is how much testing you should do, but it's kind of an idea of testing should be out throughout that life cycle. So if we take the words of GDPR, is from the conception of the idea, we need to have privacy controls, but also security controls, similar but not the same. We need to think, okay, functionally, what needs to happen? What do we want to happen? But also, how do we do that in a way that's safe? A really good example of this is dealing with people that are in a minority. So, or a group that has a lot of people that don't like them. You've probably heard of Grindr. You've probably heard years ago it's been abused, and it probably continues to be, but essentially Grindr is a dating app for gay men. And I bring this up not to pick on them, mind you, because it's great what they're doing, bringing people together is wonderful, but it has been abused many times. An example is in America. It was used, I think it was 4 men targeted a man in his own home, beat him up and robbed him in Cairo quite a few years ago now. It's not illegal to be gay, but it's not looked upon well, and the police were actually found to have been abusing it to target gay men, not because they can arrest them, but because they can find other reasons to arrest them. And so thinking from the start, oh, this could be abused in maybe this way. And that's kind of something you would think of. Gay men do struggle. I mean, the LGBTQ plus community does have a lot that it has to worry about. And designing an app that brings together, awesome, but do it in a way that's safe for them. Again, the development phase, also needs security validation. Consider the libraries you're using, the code you're writing, and how you're writing it. Is there a secure development lifecycle documented? Do you have that methodology in place? Is there naming standards? Sounds really simple, but these are little things that are layering upon layering, and that's actually making your code and your solution more robust. Another challenge you'll probably find is some development teams start out as one person, and it's, well, just for now, I'll get it working. But as you know, I started out in network architecture, and these temporary solutions became the most permanent. And if you don't start from the beginning, it's not going to happen, or it is, but it's going to take a lot of bloody work. And so considering things like your threat intel feeds, so you're using solutions, but right now what the trends are, what the threats are for that specific environment, and you're not embedding known issues. Consider, doing your automated code review. That's a great solution, but also manual code review takes more work, but at least you're doing that peer review, and so people can sanity check. I do that when I'm doing my different types of security testing. Be like, I think I've got everything, but what do you think about this? And having a chat with somebody, working it through. Some people actually, I've seen this trend where they have that little rubber ducky sat on their desk and they chat to the rubber ducky. I think speaking it out loud is really helpful for me. Speaking to my colleagues is really helpful, and it helps me pick up things that I just missed accidentally. Pen testing is brilliant, don't get me wrong, but you don't want to give a pen tester your solution where they've got the lowest hanging fruit. They're doing scans, and that's it's picking all of that up, and then you get it back and it's just too overwhelming. An example is years and years ago, the first auto review. I'm not going to say.
Hold up, Zoe. Your audio's gone to Hades.
Okay, one sec.
You'll need to unmute yourself again. There. And now try having us speak. I can't hear you. Can we do this talk in mime? Sorry, everybody. Technical difficulties. And you know why? It's because the internet sucks. If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. All you need to do is think about any recent incidents when you've tried to do something and the internet has
that should work now.
For you. There we go. You're back, and the audio is good. I'm going to disappear into the ether and let you catch
at all. Can you hear me?
We can now hear you again. We can hear you. Don't worry. It's fine. Carry on.
Wait. Got it.
Oh.
Got it.
You're good. Your audio is good again. Would you like
to continue? Flipped through every single output I have. Okay. I'm going to go back. Sorry. Right. We're back here. Where were we? Development testing. Okay. So through testing, you obviously do your unit testing. You use your functional testing, your Q&A. Again, that's not my area, but I imagine lots of tests. I know there are go and no-go decisions that you have to make of, it can fail a number of tests, but it can't fail these specific ones or this percentage, all of those quite difficult things. But also do stress testing. The one thing that I've seen before quite a bit on pen tests are like, we test that administrator user can do X, yeah? But can a normal user then take that session key and get that X transaction completed? That sounds very simplified, but you know what I mean? Like, can I do something that I shouldn't be allowed to do? Because testing it functionally is brilliant, but testing it of, what shouldn't happen, because people abuse solutions. I mean, that's just in our nature. We're curious. We're going to see, can I do more? Can I access more information? And so we need to prepare for that. Mind you, I am saying this is a skill. This is definitely another skill. I'm not saying every developer is going to have this skill, but they need to be in a team that skill exists. Going into deployment, often I'll get, we've never done a pen test, but we're already live. And I say, actually, before you release it live, you should do a pen test or at least some sort of validation. If you've not done it, that's okay, but let's get that done, because there's things that you're going to miss. And also, once you've caught those low-hanging fruits, you're protected against OWASP top 10, you've done these automated scanners. I know a lot of people think vulnerability scanning is not sexy, it's not cool, but the reality is, cost-wise, it's actually quite beneficial because it's an automated tool. It does its thing, you validate and you fix it, and it can continuously run. And you're not paying a person to go and validate or go and test all of these things. It's kind of gathering that and being able to consolidate so you can address and then get that pen test done. As also, again, not scientific, but my curve goes up a bit again when you do a major update, because every single day, every update you install is going to change your surface. It's going to make changes. They're going to be small changes most of the time, but there are going to be changes. And so actually having that automated scan, picking up and monitoring those changes throughout the time to make sure you're not introducing any threats or vulnerabilities is brilliant. But anytime you make a major change, it's important to scan again, pen test again, or do some sort of validation again to make sure that you're not introducing bigger threats or introducing vulnerabilities. What was else I was going to add? Over time, starting out, it's difficult. Starting out, it's very difficult of getting into that mindset of the different security things. But over time, when you've embedded these validation checks along the way, it becomes more natural and easier. And one huge part of that is ensuring people understand the why. So I'll touch on what can I do next, but essentially understanding that why piece in the human behavior is going to help it be more embedded into the environment. So what can I do? You come from many different backgrounds, of course. You probably are in different positions, but I'm going to kind of simplify it into these 3 different areas. So I'm a developer. What can I do to ensure security by design, by default, is embedded in my environment? Well, again, if you're only a small part of a much bigger picture, realize the context of what you're doing, what you're setting up, what you're integrating. Identify if your workflows don't work. I mean, if there's something that you don't understand and it's not documented, raise that as an issue, raise that as a concern. Because actually, one of my clients said this to me just the other day, is she says to her client or to her employees, if you're doing something wrong, someone else is too. So if you raise that, we can identify and fix it. Maybe it's documenting the process. Maybe it's teaching you how to do it in a more secure way. But either way, it's not taking the blame. It's identifying where we have gaps. If you're not a developer, that's also okay too. You're still a part of that defense team. Identify business critical data, for example, or sensitive data, and understand that if there's failures in the process, you need to raise it. Really good example of this is Equifax 2017. That data was not properly identified, not properly proportionately secured. And that's why it became such a massive impact. I'm not saying to blame, but to identify where there are gaps, because the one thing that I think people are quite shocked at when I tell them, being, my background being in IT management as well, that's actually where I started, is I don't sit over people's shoulders. I don't watch what they do every day. And so I'll miss things, that's how shadow IT comes into place, because there's workflows that aren't working. And so they implement something to get it working. And that's a failure on me, because I need to be able to know what you need so I can properly protect, but also support you. If you're a manager, what can you do? Well, you need to make sure that your teams are supported, fight for them, provide that training, make sure they have the resources. A lot of times I do a lot of mentoring, but I also manage people. And if I see a report or a document or something, a task that I know is not up to the standard of my colleague, I won't go to them and be like, what the hell, this is shit. I'll go to them and say, I know this doesn't align with your usual quality, so something's wrong. Are you okay? Or I might not even say that, because it depends on how the person, I know how they're going to react to feedback because I know them, and I'll say, how are you doing? How are things going? And it could be actually maybe there's a gap in the process and they need more training, but most of the time it's, I'm really struggling. I'm overwhelmed with work, or I'm overwhelmed in my personal life. Mental health is, as we've already discussed, a huge part of being successful and healthy. And so if we're not asking, they might miss things without anybody realizing. So making sure that your teams are supported both in their training, in their resources, in their capacity, those are all quite critical parts of being a secure environment, or supporting a secure environment. Diverse teams are brilliant. You need that diversity of thought, diversity of skill, the diversity of gender, ethnicity, experiences. Those are great, but you also need to support that. You're not going to hire a diverse hire and then expect them to change the culture. You need to, from the start, embed that acceptance and recognize their successes, even if they're different than what you view traditionally as successful, because that's going to make everybody work together better and more effective and more securely. How can organizations be more secure? How can they make a more secure culture? Well, it goes back to similar pieces with the my keynote failed. There we go. It goes back to similar parts that I talked about with the manager, is ensuring those diverse skills and experiences are supported, but also you're the organization. You see from a holistic point of view. So you need to apply that and understand that. So view risks being properly identified, ensuring that your threat intelligence and patch management programs are properly maintained. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that I've written a pen test, a vulnerability scan, because yes, I do those, even if they don't sound super sexy. I like doing those because they pick up a big amount of what the holistic view is, and allow me to kind of help them in that direction. And most of them, the solution is you need to implement a more robust patch management cycle. You need to embed your security scans with your patch management cycle so that you can actually make those changes effectively and then validate them. Patch management is really important, and I think it's quite often forgotten. Another part is consider tabletop exercises. Business focused, yes. Product focused, yes. But just figure out what scenarios are likely, what likely threats, and then design a exercise against it. Remember that we've been talking again about design being important, but also by default. So by design being from the conception of the idea, we have these controls and practices. The by default is consider somebody signing up to your service, and they put their credentials in, and maybe they've reused that password along the way, but by default, you require them to use multi-factor authentication and teach them as to why that's important. You're also protecting that person and your environment, because maybe a malicious actor has already stolen their credentials and they go to log in. But thankfully, you've given that person back control because you've enforced multi-factor authentication. You've enforced those controls. Big vendors don't always do that. I mean, I work with Office 365 security assessments all the time, and by default that is not turned on. So another way to make it more secure, I mean, they have a lot of great security practices, but that's not added. So let's start from the beginning and say, actually, what can we put in place and enforce that's protecting the users, even if they don't understand necessarily why it's important right away. Another example is why tabletop is really important is if you've got these alerts in place, but nobody takes the action, you're going to run into something like what happened to Target in 2013. An alert was raised, nobody actioned it, and bad things happened. So if your sensitive data is identified and classified and proportionally protected, if you've got robust documentation, robust processes and workflows, and a team that knows they can raise issues without being chastised, and you've enforced the by design but also by default throughout the life cycle, then you're going to be a much more secure environment and actually end up being a much better solution that's going to be long-term beneficial. And also it also enhances your reputation. So this is a solution that people are going to care about, want to use, and that's going to make you successful. Because the last note is our culture has been changing. GDPR, Cambridge Analytica, those both were quite global in the understanding that all data has value, and consumers are starting to understand that they have a right to their privacy, and they want to work with organizations that value their privacy and value them as consumers, not just the finance. And so if you're seen as an organization that even if you fail, you've mitigated because you've thought from the conception, embedded security, you're going to make a difference and people are going to like you. So that's always good. But that is my talk. I would love to answer questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Actually, the first question happens to be about that because I promised I'd say it ages ago. Okay, Balloon Neck. The official thing is from Shay. Which webcomic is that?
Romantically Apocalyptic. It is a brilliant webcomic. I know the artist. He is wonderful. It is so much fun. So go check it out.
Okay. Shay has also brought us another question, and this one is going to be a bit of a mouthful to repeat for everybody. If you've already launched and you have to commission a penetration test, what is the basic direction you suggest giving to the company you engage? That's a mouthful.
That is, but it's a great question. And I think one thing that is often misunderstood is when you're working with a pen testing company or a person, it's not okay to just be like, okay, go off and do it. And then that's it. You need to tell them what you're worried about. You know, what are your concerns? Why are you doing this pen test? This is the first time we're doing a pen test. They want to know that because then they can kind of prepare how they're going to approach it. Or if you're like, you know, this is the exact scenario that I'm really concerned about, and maybe it's a bit more focused, maybe a red team exercise potentially, but you're giving them that direction. Also, not every pen tester is created alike. We specialize in different things. I mean, I wouldn't call myself a pen tester, mind you, but they specialize in different things. Yeah. The reason I don't is because I don't enjoy it as much. But so I've moved away from that. But you know, so you want to say, you know, this is what I want to focus on. These are my risks. This is the testing I have done. This is the controls I do have in place. And you know, I view a pen test less as a black box exercise, more, especially the first time around, to bypass these controls because, yeah, maybe they might stop something, but what's the worst case scenario, especially in the first, you know, iteration? And then every time you go further, maybe you can start, you know, feeling a bit safer because you do have those controls and maybe not whitelisting as much. But I think the approach is be clear, be communicative, you know, tell them what your view of success is, because your technical team and your senior leadership might have two different views of success. So make sure that that's clearly explained to the pen tester, and so that they can provide you with a report that makes sense to you. And also, if you have certain data that's more sensitive, certain systems that are more sensitive, and they're going to be testing a variety, give them that prioritization so they can properly apply those criticality levels. Be clear. That's the main part. And when you're finding the right person, make sure that they have the right skills that you're kind of looking to validate, and understand if you're in a specific industry with specific regulations, it's important to know that they've dealt with that before and they understand that context, because not everyone does. And it's important because, I keep saying important, sorry. It's important because that again is going to go towards what you level your criticality of. I hope that answers the question.
I'm lost. I don't know.
I kind of ramble a lot, so I get worried that I don't answer questions.
That's fine. I think Shay can answer that. We do have another question from Milan, which is, with a lot of businesses moving to the cloud, does this help with security, especially when cloud providers managing some of the security for their clients in PaaS offering, that's platform as a service for those who are not aware, offerings, for example?
Yes and no. Shit answer, isn't it? So shared responsibility models are often not really quite looked at. So when you go with a third party or go with another service, there are certain things that you're not going to be responsible for. I mean, if you go to the cloud, you're not going to be managing the infrastructure likely, but you are, you're not going to do the physical, but you still are going to be part of that security implementation. That example of Office 365, they test and validate their environment is secure, but your use of it is on top of that. And so you need to secure the services you're using in, AWS, Azure, you need to implement, logging in safely. So using key-based access or however it is you need to do it in your environment, those controls are still within your responsibility. So there is benefits, definitely. A lot of these different places have to be ISO 27001 compliant. Not that compliance necessarily means they're the best, but they do have put in the considerations. They have tested, and they have teams that are qualified to continuously test their platform. Your use of it still needs to be secured. So looking at contracts, looking at SLA, so service level agreements, knowing that if they're breached, or if one of their other hosts are breached on their system, are they going to notify you? Do they have to? In the EU, we do have a bit of somewhat a bit benefits, because there's certain things they do have to notify of, but we still want to know what that timeline is, and we need to know, if some third-party contracts say they cover certain incident response responsibilities, understanding what that roles and responsibility distinction is, so that you're managing it properly, you're validating they are following what they say they're following, and everything you're still responsible for, you're able to design and approach properly. Another great example is Office 365. I talk about that a lot because I do a lot of audits on it, but often people have auto forward turned on because by default it's turned on, and people just assume that Office 365 is safe because it's a big organization, and most of the times it is. But what happens if they get in, they turn auto forward on because you've not disabled it, and then you block their access, and then 6 months later you call me back because we've got another breach, but we don't know how they got in, and they didn't. They've just been forwarding every single email to their personal email address. That I've actually dealt with.
Yeah, and you just making me remember having to review contracts after they were already about 5 years old. Jesus.
Yes, unfortunately, that is. Compliance teams are my best friend. I love them because they can look at a contract, they can understand it, and then they can tell you what it is. And I'll look at a contract and be like 3 days of me being like, what?
Okay, well, we have two very quick last questions. Next up is Jamie, which is one that I care about as well. How much could we and should we be automating security within software engineering?
So that's a difficult question because it does depend on your environment. So when you're, working through kind of building your secure development lifecycle, one challenge is your cost, your budget, financially, how much can you spend? Also, what tools are available? Because again, I don't know the automated codes like validation tools very well because I don't use them, but I know that they can be quite pricey. So understanding, what open source solutions are out there and that you can use, because a lot of times solutions aren't used to the top of their capability. So understanding, is there free services you can use? How much time will it take to implement it? Because that full-time employee's time costs money. What paid services are there, what the licensing fee is, and so on and so forth, and understanding your budget. And then, in my opinion, I started out in network architecture, as I mentioned. Automating as much as you can, brilliant, because that's saving time. But doing it in a way that's actually effective is so critical. I know I'm not answering your question directly, and I'm sorry for that, but it's because every situation is different. But I think the two takeaways on that, so I'll be quick. I realize I'm taking a lot of time. The two takeaways are ensuring that you're embedding it and using it to the top of its capability, not just deploying it and ignoring it, and also ensuring the team understands the limitations of it. So it might do X, but it might have some false positives, or it might test this, but it doesn't test that. So knowing that and being able to approach the manual side to kind of balance it out is also important, if that makes sense. So, I know I didn't answer it though.
I know it's fine. It's just to condense that down. It's automate all the things, but know how to press the buttons manually.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, we do have one last question from Oliver, and that is: are there some good guidelines for a dev who might be a bit security naive, i.e., most developers?
And that's okay. I do want to clarify that security is a very big field. There's all these different facets. So I'm not trying to say you need to be a master of all of them. That's not possible. But can you put that question up again, actually? I want to see exactly. I want to answer it. So, so I would say the biggest thing is start where you don't know. What are you concerned about? The unknown can be terrifying, but starting out is, I know that I'm doing this solution. So what are little things that I am a bit confused of, or what are little things that I don't understand, and getting that clarity and that communication with your colleagues, because I've found that discussing it between each other, you'll actually raise awareness, but also understand different concepts that other people have already learned. Another thing you can do is understand the foundations. I mean, you're a developer. Do you understand the layers of the network? Do you understand how systems are interacting? Do you understand the tooling you're specifically using, what it's doing? Those are really good places to start. And also, if you're senior leadership or the organization, it might be, let's get a security person to sit with the dev team. Let's get a security person embedded in the team, because they can also help you and kind of pick up things that you don't even know that you might not be doing properly. So kind of understanding those, your everyday workflows, trying to embed, what are some other considerations along the way? And if possible, a great way to do that is to attend security or dev-related conferences that talk about security. Maybe watch some videos, maybe kind of attend a few different courses that talk about doing things in a secure way, using the tooling that you know, because it's unfair to expect you to learn my whole industry. And if you can, that's brilliant. Probably take my job, but it is fair to say, trying to pick up different topics along the way is going to get you in that proper mindset to approach it in different different perspectives, if that makes sense.
Okay. We've also dropped in the OWASP top 10 in the chat, so people have a good place to start. So thank you very much, Zoe. Any last comments before we start on next?
No, I don't have any. I've been chatting a lot, so hopefully I'm not bored anyone.
Considering they kept asking questions the entire time, I'm going with no. Right. I thank you very much, Zoe, and I hope you have enjoyed giving that talk.
Yeah. Thank you so much for.
Oops, may have clicked the button a bit early. Oops. And now Hannah, I hope she's ready.
I'm ready.
So you will be introducing the next speaker, e.g. an actual robot rather than Zoe's robot voice. So I'm going to disappear into the ether and let you start. And then when you stop talking, I'll stop.
Oh, you've gone.
I realize you just need to press play
okay?
when you're done. When you press play, we're good.
Okay. Can you tell that I'm no good at this whole thing? So our next speaker is Chris Noring. He can't take questions because he's not here tonight. However, we can. His messages are open on Twitter, so feel free to send them straight to him. So he's a developer advocate from Microsoft, and his talk is about Blazor. So let me go.
Hey everybody, my name is Chris Noring. I work at Microsoft as a cloud advocate. You can reach me on Twitter at Chris_Noring. I'm here tonight to talk about Blazor, this new framework from Microsoft, and the fact that you now can use C# everywhere. The first thing you need to know when it comes to Blazor is that it has different hosting models. That means that you can choose one of two paths of how to build your application. The two different paths are, first off, the client-side one, and secondly, the one that is server-side based. So what is the difference? Well, in the client-side version, it runs in the browser as WebAssembly application. That means that anything that runs in a browser is part of a sandbox, so it can't do anything to the client's computer, which means that there are things that you can't do, such as access the file system, but you can use .NET Core standard libraries, definitely. The server-side model is a bit different because it's part of an ASP.NET Core application. So let's try to look at some pros and cons for these two different models so you are better informed of what you can do. When it comes to the pros of this, it means that it doesn't, for the client, it means that it doesn't have a server-side dependency. It just works as a standalone application written in WebAssembly because that's the end result. And this means that you can deploy it on GitHub or Azure or wherever you want. It's just a web application. It also offloads the server. That means that the client, per definition, is taking on a lot more work. There's a lot more application logic that goes on. The cons is that you are restricted by the browser. The capabilities that the browser can perform is what you can perform. And you also need the browser to be fairly modern. It needs to support WebAssembly. The size is also a thing, because when you start using .NET libraries as part of your application, some of these needs to be yanked out and bundled together with your application logic. So the bundle is a little bit bigger than the server-side version. And there's also some limitation on the .NET runtime, and the tooling support up until now is a bit less mature. But the differences between the two hosting models is becoming less and less. What about the server-side version? Why should I consider that? Well, if we look at the pros, we see that the size of the application itself is way smaller because it's piggybacking on top of a .NET Core application that you're running anyway. Also, the tooling and debugging is more mature, which means that you can take advantage of existing debugging, for example, and you think of it more as a full stack application. So if you have a breakpoint in your data layer, you can have that and easily move on to the Blazor application in one go. It can use the full .NET, any .NET Core compatible APIs, but there are cons. So the cons for the server-side model is latency, because every interaction that you do is a network call. There's also no sense of an offline. If there's no internet, you don't have a Blazor application. Whereas if you were to use the WebAssembly version of this, you could, for example, with the notions of progressive web apps, implement some kind of offline features, but you can't do that here. Scalability is another con, because there's only so many clients that it can support, because there's a lot of client connections. It's a big chapter of how this works. So I'm not going to bother you too much in a 20-minute talk about Blazor, but we have some docs that really covers this part. Now, how do we build a Blazor application? Well, it's .NET Core, right? And if you built any applications before in .NET Core, you know that you have an executable called .NET and the new keyword. Once you have the new, you're supposed to select some kind of template for your project. If you're running the latest and greatest .NET Core, one of these templates is called Blazor WASM or Blazor WebAssembly, if you read it out. And you just call that, and if you want to call the -o flag, you can decide what the name of the directory should be. And then you call .NET build followed by .NET run, and this pretty thing is what you end up with, this application with a menu and a main area. Now, there are development tools, the three good options. Visual Studio itself, Visual Studio for Windows, it has a full support, it has the project template, it has syntax highlighting and a debugger. Secondly, there is Visual Studio Code. It's a great editor for many, many things. The Blazor support in it has the project template, it has a debugger, but it doesn't quite have the syntax highlighting of the Razor template that you actually used to author components. So I'm not really sure where they're at, but last time I checked, there was some discrepancy. Thirdly, and lastly, we have Visual Studio for Mac that almost came out of nowhere and just added this really sweet Blazor support, which supports the project template, syntax highlighting, and a debugger. So I would say that Visual Studio for Mac is on par with Visual Studio for Windows, like it should be. And I will also show you some demos here in Visual Studio for Mac so you can see for yourself how good that is. Now, these kind of frameworks, especially the WebAssembly one that I'm showing you here, are usually called SPA frameworks, single page applications. And those are component-centric. They consist of small dedicated pieces of reusable code. Blazor is no different. Here's what a component looks like. You intermix HTML with C#. It's a Razor template. So if you've used ASP.NET before, this is not news to you. Looking here on the right side, we see that we have the markup file that consists of different directives like page and code. And at the top, we have the notion of markup and some interpolation of variables. And in the bottom part, we see that we have this code section where we have variables and methods. And we can also see on line 8 here how we hook up a method towards a click event. So markup part with interpolation, the code behind, if you will. With this said, I know that they're working on a alternative where you could actually have the markup in one file and the code behind completely in another file. There are some people who want that. I'm not sure whether this has landed yet or not, but I know that that's being worked on. Component input. This is one of the most important principles when it comes to all kind of component interaction. The idea is that you pass data from top to bottom. So component input is about exposing properties on a component that a parent or a component higher up can set. Looking here at the right, that we see that we have parameters. We have this square bracket parameter, which means that this title here is publicly exposable. It's not private like everything else. And you can set this from the outside. looking at the bottom, we see that we have a parent component that uses this, in this case, a product detail component, and it sets the title property to a string. And we have another property here in which it sets this description with a value as well. So that's a fairly simple example of a component input. It doesn't get much more complicated when you try to give it an entire object either. Now, the other side of the coin is component output, because it goes in the other direction. If data was flowing from top to bottom, output or events flows from bottom to top. And the reason is that you usually have a few smart components that sits on the data, that sits on the logic, but the majority of your components are dumb or presentational components, which is just very good at showing your data, but not much more. So what you do is that you provide event callbacks in your dumber components that raises events when something happens, like a user does a selection or they push a button. At that point, you raise an event and say, this custom event with this payload data has happened and someone needs to care. So here on the left, we see that we have a click event in a child component, and we also see that we have an event callback that calls invoke async with some kind of payload, in this case a title. And in the parent component, this ends up being captured. So the parent component says, if this click event occurs, I need to care because someone has changed this component for me. And my clicked function is called in response to this child doing something. So here you have the chance to maybe call a backend service and say, hey, this component, this product changed, and you need to persist that in a database, for example. Now I'll show you how you can be building a utility component with the parameters and routes. Okay, I've opened up a Blazor project in Visual Studio for Code. I'm about to create a component. I give it a name, test.racer. You probably want to give it a better name than I am. I clear up some code here, and one of the first things I do is to specify a page directive. This is how you would route to this component. You don't have to have this. This is only if you want it to be part of that route in the URL in your browser. Now I also give it a code section, and I start typing my markup, and I give it a div, and I'll keep working on this in just a few seconds. But meanwhile, I'm creating this variable that I want to show in my markup. I give it the parameter decorator. Remember, this is how I made something public. And yeah, it's mad at me for a reason. I can't expose a primitive, a string towards the outside world. It needs to be a property. So I clean this up. I instead use this prop syntax to give me a property. I call it public string, and I give it a name title. I'm really inventive here, right? So I give it a name title and a getter and a setter, and I'm able to interpolate this inside of the markup portion of my page. So I type title. Now I have my component, it's done, and I can go to a parent component and start using this. So I navigate to my parent component. First off, I clean up some stuff that doesn't need to be there. And I type the name of my component, which is test. And I start using this property that we call title. So I type title. It's helping me with auto-completion. I give it a string as input. So this is me passing input from a parent component towards a child component. We will show this in the browser and show that it works. So we start the debugger, and it starts building, and hopefully in a few seconds we'll have a browser that's up and running. All right, building, and there it is. Now, routing in Blazor is about 4 major things. Should it be routable? If a component should be routable, it should have a page directive and a route. If it shouldn't, don't add it. It's also about route parameters. Part of your route can have wildcards, values that you don't know what it is beforehand, but it could be the ID of a product, for example. And also query parameters. That's the last part of routing, and we need to care about those as well, looking here at our bottom bullet, we see that we use those to kind of limit how much data comes back from the backend. And this is a very important topic, because if you don't manage this in a good way, you might end up getting millions of records back, and nobody's happy about that, because it's going to take you all day long to load that page. Now, route parameters look like this. You have a route and a param, and the Blazor is able to kind of interpret what this means. And in the case of the other route here, we can see that we're able to set a type to as well if we wanted to. And looking at our page directive, we see now that we have a route param in the form of ID, and we tell it explicitly to become an integer. We can also see here in our code section that we have a public int ID with a getter and a setter, and it's able to dig this out. So the only thing we need to do is to create this ID variable just like the page directive on top. And once we have this lifecycle method down below here on parameter set, we know that this value has been filled in by the routing mechanism, and we are ready to go towards backend and say, hey, given this ID, give me the product that this corresponds to. Right. When we are talking about navigation, there are two different ways of doing that. One is to use nav links. These are just anchor tags that you're used to from HTMLs that are wrapped into Blazor components. And the other way is the programmatic navigation, in which we tell some kind of navigation manager to say that, hey, as the result of doing this operation, could be saving a product, we want to navigate back to a list page, for example. So two ways. Nav link, this is you clicking a link. The programmatic way is to call the navigate to method on the navigation manager. And lastly, remember to call the lifecycle method or define it inside of your component on parameter set. This is when your value is ready to use. So the nav link, the navigate method with the programmatic way of doing things. And let's talk about query parameters again. As I said, this is about how to slice the data. This is to ensure you don't get 2 million records back, but in this case, only 20 records. Query parameters are everything that happens after the question mark in your URL. In this case, we have a page that says, I want results from page 1, and I want to make sure that the page size is 20 records, so that's clear. This is not a package that's being added to Blazor from the beginning, but you need to add it. If you've used ASP.NET before, you know that this is a package that you need to be adding through the command line or via your Visual Studio. But remember to add it, and once you have that, you have the capability of parsing the query part of your URL. So here you see how we are using this query helpers class and a method called parse query. And once we have a URI, we're able to say, hey, I want to try to yank out a certain page param, or I want to yank out the page size. And lastly, I end up going towards some kind of data repository and say, given this page with this page size, give me this slice of data. Let's show this in a demo as well, so you can see how you could be using query parameters. So hopefully you understand how this works. Okay, so we have opened up our application. We will try to work with some concept of routing. We have a list of products. We are looping those out. We have a nav link and an href. And we also have the parsing here of different query parameters. And we see that we have our URI. We also parse out page and page size from the query part of our URL. And we try to assign that to param and param2. I should probably rename param and param2 to something more valuable. But the point is we assign them to page param and page size param. And lastly, here on line 32, after we've parsed the second one, we see that we send that into get products, both of these parsed params, and yeah, it ends up slicing the data for us. Now, this is an in-memory database. The get products has some reasonable defaults, but we're saying if we pass them, let's use some link query statement here and get the correct page for us and the right number of records. We will take this and show this in the browser how this can work so you understand what's going on. And yeah, we have the route kittens because we like kittens. Okay, so we go into our URL and we start typing kittens. We get all the kittens. We just want a few, as many as we can handle. So we start by saying page. We want page 2. And from page 2, we want a certain page size. We want 2 kittens on from page 2. So we get the 3rd and the 4th kitten. We change into page 1. And we see that we get the 2 first kittens. So we can definitely see how the query parameters are working for us to slice the size of the data. We are nearing the end of our talk, but I just wanted to mention that Blazor helps you with forms. It does so by implementing this edit form component. And yeah, you'd probably have to look at a longer version of this talk to get all the details, but know that it helps you with collecting the data. There are dedicated controls to handle different kinds of data. It also helps you with validation summary. So if you've been using ASP.NET Core, this is not news to you. There is a default behavior there. I think I'm showing, yes. So here you have an annotations class, and you can definitely assign that as a model, and you get some free validation because of it. And that could be anything. It could be required or matching some kind of regular expression, or if you've seen data annotations before in .NET, you know how this works. And we rely on a lot of the defaults here from the annotations that we add to the class. And yeah, we also have dedicated components to handle various types of input. We can also trigger validation from code should we want to. In this case, we need to work with a more advanced context object. So instead of a model, we talk to a context. And we can call validate on that context. And this is how we programmatically are able to validate. Normally, it validates by you hitting a submit button. There's also some custom validation. What we do in custom validation is to build our own validation class completely. This is if you want to add validation to your class and you're not happy with whatever validation you have on your annotated class. So yeah, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I'm going to show it if you want to pause here in the video of this talk so you can study this in detail. And yeah, does a lot of things for you, and you can definitely start using this custom validation thing that adds rules. And we're not going to show a demo of this. We don't have time. There's also a notion of JavaScript interop, which means that you can make JavaScript and C# play nicely together, which is great. And you, again, need to inject something, in this case, an IGS runtime, and which enables you to call various JavaScript functions like so, and you're able to deal with the results. So this is a perfect mix if you do have some investments or libraries in JavaScript that you definitely want to use, so you can mix the two. In summary, Blazor has 2 hosting models, part of either you can be part of an ASP.NET project or it's a standalone WebAssembly. The WebAssembly is in a sandbox. Regardless of hosting model, you can use .NET libraries and C# in all the layers. There is VS for Mac that I showed you the demos in. There's VS for Windows, and you got syntax highlighting, debugging, and a project template. VS Code is almost as good. It doesn't have the syntax highlighting, but other than that, it's a perfectly good low-cost option. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope I will see you on the internet somewhere. And definitely send me IMs if you got any questions or queries about this talk.
Okie dokie. We now need to thank via the medium of the internet, Chris. Whoa, Inception. Let's remove that. Yeah, we need to thank via the medium of the internet, Chris, for that talk. So please feel free to drop him any questions or anything on his Twitter. Next up, we have a subject very close to my heart. My first ever talk was on this matter, and it's going to be presented by somebody with a far more impressive beard than my own and a better cap. So next up, we have Gerard Sands. You're a developer advocate at AWS, I believe on the Amplify product. I can't hear you. Have you got yourself on mute? That universal thing in like it's Zoom conversation. I was on mute. Sorry. No, still no dice. Can anybody else hear him, or is it just me? I'm going to do the worst IT support thing. Have you tried turning it off and on again?
Okay.
There we go. We're good. We're good. We're good.
Is that okay?
We can hear you.
Oh no. Oh no. Can hear. Okay, let's see.
Oh, no, we can. We can hear you.
Hello.
You are now
hello,
making vocal noises on the internet. Gerard, we can hear you. You are speaking. We can hear you breathe heavily.
Looks okay.
He can't hear us. I love
What
this.
about now?
Can you
better?
hear us now? We can
No.
hear you. Can you hear us? Oh my Lord. It's like the beginning of every Zoom conversation I've been having for the last like 8 months. All right. I'm going to drop him a message. We can hear you. You can't hear.
Should
us.
work now. Should
we
work
working?
now, but
Is it
the
live?
funny thing is that I cannot hear you. So maybe you can hear me, but I'm not able to hear you.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll have to go without your sound. Okay. Maybe now can you speak to me?
I'm speaking from still
perfect,
beyond the grave.
Perfect. Now I can hear you. I'm I somehow I went for to make a coffee, and that was a disaster because I unplugged the microphone, so the settings reset it.
Oh dear. Right. So as I was saying, Gerard, you are from AWS as a developer advocate. You, I believe, are a lover of all things JavaScript like myself, and data systems and PWAs. And I believe you work in the Amplify product. So I'm assuming you're going to explain all this in your talk.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
Amazing. Well, if that's the case, I will leave you to it, and I'll come back with some questions from the crowd.
Well, thanks a lot. So, I mean, this is really a hard spot today after the awesome talks that we have seen, and I was really impressed, by the quality, and I hope I will raise my bar to meet, the previous speakers. And one thing that I must warn you is that my style is a little bit over the top. So yeah, let's go for it. So in this talk, I'm gonna be covering AWS Amplify, and particularly Amplify Data Store, which allows you to work offline. So you can store user data on the browser. And then on the other side, I'm going to cover a little bit of GraphQL, and I'm going to keep it very light for you. So first thing first, a little bit of an introduction. I mean, this is my name, Gerard Sands. I'm originally from Spain. I'm not from the US. A lot of people think that I'm from the US, but actually I'm from Barcelona. And as I was mentioning, I'm a developer advocate at AWS, and you can see that I have a cat, I have some fancy t-shirts, and I also use a baseball cap. That's kind of my style. I've been speaking around the world for maybe 6 years now, so I'm quite comfortable. It's a little bit of a bragging spot. I like to brag a little bit. Sorry about that. But let's start with the main topic. And I think for most people, which will be front-end developers or web developers is that maybe you are not so much familiar with this concept, which is offline first. So I would like you to spend a little moment and think about what that would mean. And I mean, I don't want to put you in the spot, but mainly what it means is this. Maybe you have seen this. I mean, this is a game that if you are using Chrome, if you press the spacebar, you can play this game. And it's this dinosaur like jumping around and, you know, escaping from these cactuses. And of course, if you have a nice app, that's not what you want for you know, your users. No, I mean, it's all good. You are offline, you can play a game, but probably you want something else. So what we are going to cover today is how you can provide offline first for web. And this is specifically avoiding the dinosaur. I mean, nobody wants their users to experience the dinosaur. And even less if you want to design your app to work mainly offline. And some apps that you will be using this approach is probably news. So you want to be able to read your news when you are in the underground, or maybe it's an app that you need to go in places that you may have no network. So that's the main aim for this talk, how you would go around that. And using web, because you could also use native technology. So we are going to use the web in an offline environment. So first thing is avoiding the dinosaur. That's clear. The other thing is like providing a nice user experience, and that will be taking into account at any time informing the user when the application is offline, so the user is aware, and probably giving some extra help when, for example, you store some data on the device and you synchronize that data when you go back online. So the user has the control. These are a few things that you need to take into account. So this brings to the next topic, which is using native-like features. And we are very used to go onto the phone and use these features. We go offline, we are able to still use the apps, but of course we are talking web here. So now we need to think about what are the challenges. And probably the first challenge that you will face is how you will store the user data and all of the problems around that. And you probably need some kind of reliable storage. So two things: you need to be able to store data while offline, which can be a little bit surprising how to achieve that. And the other thing would be when you go online again, you want to be synchronizing the data. And obviously you don't want to ask the user every time that the data is being synchronized, so it gets the best experience. All right. Well, this is the first section of the talk, and I like you to congratulate you to go that far. And, you know, you can give yourself a pat in the back. You know, I like to use cats, so get prepared for more cats in this talk. A way to achieve these features that I was talking about is progressive web apps. So this is a technology that you can use. I'm going to use PWA as an abbreviation. And there are a few things that PWA provides you. One thing is that it provides you a secure context, and this is a transport layer that will make sure that if you are using your app from a specific domain, that domain will be providing your JavaScript that will be executed in the client, and also any assets that go around it. Of course, this also applies to data, to user data, so you make sure that nobody's messing with that. The next thing is the service worker, and this is providing the magic behind the scenes, and that will be the first thing that you will need to avoid the dinosaur that I was mentioning. The next thing is, in order to provide the best user experience, we are going to use what is called the web app manifest. And that will provide us with little configurations that will make that experience the best for you. As a developer, what you will be doing is customizing that experience for different devices. Here I'm showing mobile, there's also desktop, and I'm also showing a tablet. So that's a whole spectrum of devices, and the way the PWA behaves is completely different than the regular experience in the browser. One feature that you can use with PWAs is called standalone. And this feature will look for the user as a separate application. So the user wouldn't need to use the browser or navigate to a new URL, and they can use an icon on their environment. This could be Microsoft, this could be a desktop application, this could be iOS, and it will behave as is a native application. So that's pretty cool. The way a service worker behaves is quite interesting, and I'm going to try to explain how that works. And you need to think that we are now offline, so that's the behavior that I want to explain. And we have an index.html page. Usually that will be a single page application, and the user may decide to refresh the page. And that will create some requests, and usually that will involve some JavaScript and also some assets, which I'm using here as an example, the app and also a logo. The service worker is just sitting between the browser and the network, and in this case, is going to do something quite smart, which is going to look for this request on the cache. And if you have installed the service worker, it will match this request, which what has been installed in that device. And if it finds a match, it will send that back to the browser. So this is actually quite magic, because for the browser, at this point, there's no difference. So it behaves as if it was online. All right, these are usually the reaction from web developers is like, oh, wow, I didn't know that you could do that. But this is available today. And it's quite interesting technology. And I want to introduce AWS Amplify. So this is a tool that it sits between, it's a bridge between front-end developers and cloud developers or DevOps. Let me show that. And I think the easiest way to introduce this concept is call it full stack serverless. I mean, if you want to use like loaded, terms, this is a new term. And I think it's quite good because it's compressed, and it uses full stack, which everyone is familiar, and also serverless. And I'm going to go over serverless a little bit, but AWS Amplify tries to be the bridge between the client and the cloud. And it's trying to make this transition easy for developers. If you have a serverless background, it also opens the door to do front-end. And if you are coming from a front-end background, it eases the way for you to start doing cloud. So these are, providing help for these two different developers. So this is kind of the intro. And if we look at the evolution of serverless, we start from the monolith, and that will be executed in a server. I just want to explain how we got into serverless. So this is a little bit of a going back in time. Then the next technology that comes after the monolith is what is called microservices. And this will be usually taking the logic from the monolith and splitting that logic in different microservices. This will also be split in different containers. So we are moving away from the server and just a blob holding all of the features. This also has another evolution, which gets us to the serverless architecture. And you can see here, I'm using a cloud and also functions. So this is, again, another iteration on this model. And we broke up the microservices again and we are now operating with functions, and we get some benefits from that. So how is the difference between traditional versus serverless? I put here some important key points. And of course, we have split all of the features. So now we can use these features separately. We have some nice qualities from this. We have elastic capacity. We only pay for what we use, and it provides a nicer way of developing apps. And I'm going to rate serverless above the traditional approach, and this is because of all these qualities. So this is an example showing traditional architecture versus a serverless architecture. So you can see that some of the pieces have moved a little bit. We have some piece that works on the client, and this is thanks to JavaScript. So we have JavaScript on the client, and we have some other features that they are now separate. We have the monolith, which is that cube, and we have a data source and security, and these are now working independently. So AWS Amplify provides different pieces. The first one will be a set of libraries, which is the Amplify framework. There's also a set of developer tools that will help you along the way. And of course, there are cloud services. In this case, I'm talking about AWS services, but you can also use other service providers if you want to. In the middle, there's a CLI. So you can go into the terminal and run some commands that will help you build your applications. Okay, so let's look at the different options. We call these categories, and these are the building blocks that I was talking before. So because we are using serverless, we can split the features in, for example, here we can see authorization, API, so that REST and GraphQL, chatbots, analytics, extended reality. Oh my God, there's a lot of things. Storage, functions, of course, hosting, where you will deploy your application, and notifications. There's also machine learning and artificial intelligence. And in this talk, I'm going to cover just these two. All right, hope this is usually the reaction from people. I'm not going to cover everything, so don't get scared. This is the application I'm going to focus. And this is a single room real-time chat, which I call Chatty. And we are going to make this PWA. This is how it looks. So you can log in and share messages with that group. And if it gets too noisy, you can also remove the messages. Here, it's myself, and I also use a robot just to make it fun. And this is exactly how the architecture looks like. So here we have the hosting. So all of the assets, JavaScript, and images are living in AWS Amplify, and this is where I deploy my solution. Authentication is handled by Amazon Cognito. This is an AWS service to deal with authentication. And then we are going to use, as I was saying at the beginning, GraphQL to deal with our data source. So we are going to store our messages in our chat in a document DB data source, which is Amazon DynamoDB. In the middle, we have a service, which is a managed GraphQL API, and this will be consumed from our client. All right, so if you are not familiar with GraphQL, GraphQL is based around a GraphQL schema. And this is a contract between our clients and the server side, which is a GraphQL API. Over here, we are seeing a type, which is using an add model that will instruct Amplify to create what is called the resolvers, and also all of the operations to store, manipulate, and also add real time. So we will get lots of features coming from that keyword, add model. The next is these are the fields and the types. And as you can see, is quite easy to read. So we have an ID, we have a user, the message that is being shared, and also a timestamp. Maybe the only thing that maybe I need to explain is this exclamation, and these are for mandatory fields. So it's pretty straightforward. What we are going to be using for this talk is Amplify Data Store. And the nice thing about Amplify Data Store is that it works in 2 states. It can work offline independently, and whenever you go online, the client is able to synchronize using GraphQL. And here I'm showing the storage engine. And when you are using web application, is going to be using IndexedDB, and if you are using a mobile, it's going to be using SQLite. These are some technical details, but it means that it can work both for web and for mobile. Whenever we go online, it just kicks in what is called the sync engine, and it's going to use the GraphQL schema to use it in order to run all of the updates in the background. This is going to be using AppSync, as I introduced before, and there are different options. The main option that is used by default is DynamoDB, but you can also use AWS Lambda or Amazon Elasticsearch. So now we are right in the money. We are in the top of the wall. We can do a lot. Maybe at this point I can show you a demo. Let's see. So this is a little demo that I prepared for you, and it just shows a couple of users that they have authenticate, so they can write messages. I mean, this is a chat application. Hi there. If you want to use the URL, you can also write messages. Maybe that's not a good idea, but if you want to play a little bit, you can do it. Hi there. Speaking at Fusion. Okay, and that's going to be, shared in real time. And probably the nicest thing that I can do is, because I made this app PWA, is I can use my phone. I can use my phone and I can execute, the app, and I can send a message, which will be awesome. So let me do that. It's just a little crazy thing to do, and you can see here that I'm just writing from my mobile. Of course, I could also install this on my desktop and also use it. So this is a kind of the features that I have available. The only problem now is that this application will not work offline. If I refresh, it will just fail. So I'm going to skip that for now. All right, let's continue. So at this point, I would go and make the application a PWA. I'm not going to show the details. I think there's not many developers in this audience. So what I'm going to do is you need to think that I went through the process that mainly was adding service worker and also adding the web app manifest. I went through the setup and I have now my chatty PWA, which is this section here. So I did all the steps. Now I have support for offline. And one thing that I achieved by doing that is now I can run my app on desktop, mobile, and also web devices. So I have a whole range of new devices that I can use. I also have improved the performance. And if you remember when I was explaining at the beginning how the service worker was being used, is because we are using the cache. So any resources that are on the cache, these are going to be skipping the network and just immediately will be available to the browser. So that gives you an extra performance. This is how it looks. Within PWA, that's called Add to Home Screen. So if you navigate to the PWA, you see this option and you can add it to your mobile phone. That's what I did on my device, which is on the left is an Android, on the right is iOS. So this is how it looks, just to show you a few examples. And this is an overview. So one thing that you can see when using PWA against web is that it's faster. That requires you to install. There's an install step for PWAs. It can work offline. it can also work full screen, which is interesting if you want to create an app for mobile or desktop. And it also gives you the feeling of a native-like application, which is obviously not available for simple web or single-page applications. So I'm going to rate PWA better, slightly better, and everything is possible now. So I hope I encapsulated the features that Offline First app bring to you, and maybe it will inspire you to create some new app. So the next thing that I'm going to ask you is that just go ahead and try it. I have a couple of resources. This is the final solution. I'm using Vue, but this is also available using Angular if you prefer Angular instead of Vue. And there's also a workshop that you can follow, and this is a step-by-step process. All right, so as always, I like to add the cats everywhere, and here, that's the end. So thank you for listening, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions now.
Okay, as I assumed, that's a lot of PWA, and I'm going to be asking a lot of questions if nobody else does. One, why are you saying PWAs are different from a web app?
Well, they are different because they are providing you different features, which are not. I mean, of course, they fall within web, but these are closer to native, what I call native-like features, and these are not, understood. I mean, if you never learn or heard about PWAs, it won't come naturally to you. That's why I consider them not so much web. It's someone in between native and web. That's the way I see it. But it's web. It's still web, of course.
I'd say every feature you can do in a PWA, you can do in a web app. You just are not a PWA unless you complete the full set of principles that define a PWA. If you skip the manifest, you're not a PWA. If you skip a service worker, you're not a PWA. But
Exactly.
You can still have each and every one of the components individually.
So the way I see it is it gives you these native-like features. Imagine notifications. Notifications only will work on, on the context of a mobile app. So it's very close to native in the sense that if you are using web, this feature won't make sense because you will never use it unless you are installing that app on a mobile. So it's in between, I would say. Of course, it's still a technology that it's web, but feature in a feature spectrum, it's closer to native. I mean, it's the way I see it, but you are completely right. This is a web stack still.
I've now got a very dangerous question to ask you.
Yeah, totally.
Packaged app, PWA or packaged app?
Okay, again?
PWA or packaged app, like Cordova, Xamarin.
Oh! I mean, of course, in my talk, I'm talking about web. So it's it's a separate kind of group. But if you go a package app which you install, that means that you have access to some of the native features, like closer to the device. And unfortunately, PWA has evolved, and most of the features are supported, but some of them are not. And then it depends what you want to build. So I would say it's more like a matrix. So then if you see a feature and then there's no support from the web stack, then you will have to move farther, and then you will need to go native. I mean, native, it's maybe hybrid, some kind of API that will interface with the native apps. And then there are different options there. And I think if you are planning to build an app, I would just go create the matrix of what features I foresee that I will need, and then see if that's supported for each of the options. And then it will give you like some path, because if the feature is not available in PWA, maybe that's the only option. So that's my approach.
we do actually have a question from the crowd, which is, oh, it's a dangerous one. Are PWAs fully supported on all browsers?
Okay, I mean, if you're coming from a web background, there's this website which will give you, the numbers and the colors like green, amber, and red. So this is exactly the same. I mean, not even the web is, 100%. Functioning. So you just need to make sure, you need to look. I would just look at which kind of devices are using. I mean, it depends if you are building a new app or you are migrating a current app. So you can go, see analytics, see what kind of devices you are dealing with, unless you have control. Sometimes if you want to roll out a PWA solution, maybe you can also control the device. And in that case, like imagine you buy some tablets, and these tablets will be used, by the user, and you control that because you are rolling out a solution for, I don't know, for a finance corporation. In that case, you just need to make sure that it works for the browser that you're going to use. If it's something more public, like, I don't know, New York Times, then you need to go big. Then you will probably have to look into this a little bit more carefully. But it just depends on your situation. I would say that nothing works 100%. I mean, not even web works 100%. So it's the same with PWA. You need to, get into the nitty-gritty and see exactly what devices are your users or your target users, and then see how much you can cover, because there will be a place that there's a gap, unfortunately. So you need to do, fallbacks.
The internet shims and rollback, and
again, so it's not like that.
Progressive.
Oh, of course. But I mean, of course, it needs to be a good fit. Before going into an adventure of PWA, before committing, I would just go and explore and make sure that it's everything that you are planning to do, it's covered.
Okay. We've got another question, which is from James. Can Amplify.js be used independently, or is it tied to the AWS platform?
So Amplify, it's built on top of AWS, and most of the libraries, they require you to create an AWS account. So my answer would be like totally, it's AWS dependent. But there are a few exceptions, like Amplify Data Store. Amplify Data Store can live separately, but only offline, because it's using IndexedDB or SQLite. So you could use that. And the problem is, the moment you go online, because we are using AWS services, you will have, of course, to create an AWS account and then link that to your account. But you could also build your own providers, because the way it's built, it's open to any implementation. So you could potentially build it on top of another cloud provider. Of course, the focus from my team is to first, cover AWS services, but there's always the option to build on top of any cloud provider if that's your requirement. But it will involve more work from your side.
Having built quite a few PWAs using CouchDB as a synchronization layer. Oh yeah.
There's good news though, because we are using GraphQL. That's a little bit better, because the way GraphQL works, it gives you a lot of flexibility. So then it's not. I mean, it's a little bit more work. It's not an incredible amount of work. It's a little bit of work.
Okay. Is there any last questions? Because I'm going to ask Gerard if there's any last points you want to point out, or things that you should go and have a gander at and just have a look.
I think probably if you are curious or you are wondering like where to start, I think probably the docs. There's a few tutorials that will take you like just maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and these are the getting started. And there's quite a lot of support. It just depends what technologies you use, but there's support for web and also native. So you can maybe give it a try and see what you can get done. What I would say is that because it's quite innovative in the way that it's using the cloud and is using serverless, which is, as I tried to show, is quite of the second generation, because maybe you are working with monolith, which is, you have like a node server that is handling your app. So then you would move into microservices. Maybe you haven't done that yet, but we are talking like second generation, which is serverless. So if you haven't experienced microservices or even serverless, this is a really nice tool to get your first experience, because there's a lot of things that have been happening that maybe you are not familiar, and one of them is GraphQL. GraphQL is a massive improvement on how you access data, and just to play a little bit with it, it will maybe surprise you.
True, and there's plenty of open source technologies to stand up and start playing, like the Apollo browsers, etc.
Yes,
so
yes,
plenty of stuff to get started with it. Okay, that is fantastic, Gerard. Thank you very much.
No worries, my pleasure.
And now we get to end of the day. So thank you very much, everybody, for sticking around and watching. Really appreciate it. It has been a lot of information and a lot of interesting talks as well, which has been fantastic. So we've got to thank our speakers, even though one of them was technically a robot. Well, maybe two of them, we're not sure. That voice, we don't know. So we've got to thank Stuart Baker for opening up the day. We have to thank Zoe Rose, Chris Noring, if he really is a person, and we've got to thank Gerard Sands as well for closing it out. Sorry, it's a little bit later than we intended, but it turns out no plan survives battle, and obviously we've run over a little bit, but thank you so much for playing along and enjoying. Please do follow the Fusion. I think it's the Fusion Hub is the Twitter handle. I'm pretty sure that Hannah will drop that in the link in the chat so that people know it. So when this will happen next year, because God forbid, this is the last Fusion of the year. This is the third Fusion of the year. The last one, I think, was the week before we all went into lockdown. Then there was September and November. So if you're all nice and you say thank you to Hannah, maybe she'll put another one on next year. So, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Otherwise, I don't get to do anything. I just sit at home bored. So, yeah, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. This video will be on YouTube afterwards, so please feel free to share it around. Just as a cheeky plug, me and Jim, the other host of Fusion, will be doing our Tech Off Topic podcast recording on Twitch tomorrow, so feel free to come and enjoy that. So, once again, thank you all. Thank our speakers and thank our sponsors in the form of Majestic, Vonage, and Logs.io for helping making this possible. And thank you to Hannah for putting all the effort in to arrange all this. So, have a wonderful evening, everybody, and we will speak to you soon.
So good.
There you go.
That was just gonna just say, I've literally for the last 20 minutes that I've been laughing at Gerard and all the cats. I just
You were not ready. You were not ready for my crazy style.
Gerard, the cats were amazing. The last one at the end with a face